Like we're
Thank
so
you.
happy to have you today. Our chat is so excited. They are immediately pointing out that I'm wearing a Seattle Mariners hat, talking to the hockey guy who is quite well known for all the jerseys in the background. Shannon, first question: how many jerseys do you think you own?
It's a lot. I haven't gone through and counted them for a long time. It's the best answer I can give is like, and I get emails like, oh, do you have this jersey? And my answer is always yes. Somebody emails like, do you have that? Yes, I do. You haven't seen it yet. I know I have it. So I actually, my intention is at some point I'm going to do a long form video where I go through the entire collection in one video. I have no idea how long that's going to take, but that's the plan.
The 27-hour live stream from the hockey guy.
It's going to be a long video. Yeah.
Looking forward to it. Okay, so let's just start with your YouTube journey. Like, what made you want to get started? Because obviously we know over 300,000 subscribers. You're super well known in this space now. Like, what made you want to get started back in 2016?
You know, it's funny. Last night I went to, they had a YouTube like creator event in North Van. And so we went to that and I was talking to some of the other creators, and a lot of people end up doing it accidentally where they upload something for friends or family. And that's what I started doing, was making videos for friends and family. I got family back east I haven't seen, so I'd make videos and vlogs. And then I made a hockey video on the Austin Matthews draft lottery, and it blew up overnight. So I was at work the next day going, what's going on? I was showing my coworkers and they're like, people are listening to you. And I'm like, I'm just as confused as you are. No idea. And so I stopped doing all the personal stuff. I did hockey videos from that day forward and just monetized and went from there.
When did you make that switch to going full time? Like, when was the time where you're like, okay, it's safe for me? Because again, it's not an immediate thing where you're just like, oh yeah, of course I'm going to do
hard.
YouTube full time.
It's hard because
yes.
I've been raised with the idea of, you know, you don't give up a job where you have full benefits. You don't ever give up a full-time job that's paying your bills. And what happened was I transitioned to a part-time job here in Abbotsford, and we started doing the math and figuring out that financially I did better on days I wasn't at work and I was doing YouTube videos than I did on days I went to work and tried to do YouTube videos around it. And then the playoffs were coming up and I was going to be working a lot of days that there were playoff games. And we realized I had to commit. So 2018, I took the dive and went full time.
Okay, so that's an interesting timeline, because I started in about 2018, 2019. And again, I wasn't full time for a couple of years, but one thing that I think we both went through was the pandemic. Like, for you, how did you manage content? How did you kind of work around the COVID-19 pandemic when really the season was paused?
Oh, that was brutal. I was really trying to find like, okay, I'm going to do playlists and content, but at that point, because everybody was home watching videos, well, YouTube's ad rates dropped through the floor because there was tons of people watching all the time and not enough advertisers to fill all the ad slots. Yep. So it was tough. Those 3 months until they announced we're going to return, trying to come up with content when nothing was happening. There was no movement of any sort towards a return. It was probably the most stressful time with the channel that I've had, but it did teach me that in the event that if there's a lockout or something, I'll be able to come up with content if that were to happen at some point. But it was not easy.
Would you say that's been the biggest challenge since you started YouTube? Because another thing we hear a lot about is people losing the passion for it. It doesn't seem like that's happened to you, but like, what's been the biggest challenge for you?
There's days where I'm definitely more locked in and enthusiastic than others, but I think one thing that I benefit from is that I had over 20 years of working not great jobs. And so that's always in the back of my mind of, you get paid to talk about hockey and you have this great following. Things are pretty good. So some days it's not as passionate as others, but there's always something that'll happen. Like when I'm watching hockey games where I'm like, you know what? I love this. This is great. I'm so happy that I get to see this. And there's always something that rekindles that passion for me.
That's awesome. Yeah. Like the passion's there. And that's the thing. People can tell it. It comes through right on camera. People were talking about it a lot in our chat when we brought you on, or excuse me, when we teased that we were bringing you on in yesterday's
Actually,
show.
one example of that would be last night, because I went to that event. I couldn't watch
Yeah.
the games live, so I PVR'd them and I avoided spoilers. So I took notes when I got home and I watched the entire game. I danced around when that empty netter went in for the Canucks last night. I was so happy Lankinen got the shutout. I was so absolutely so happy that they won that game, and I was happy for DeBrusque. And I mean, that was the quietest I think I've ever seen the crowd in Boston, other than the booing. And that was a perfect game by the Canucks last night.
Absolutely. It's a beautiful thing. Let's talk about it. Let's get to it. This is Canucks
Sure.
conversation. So let's talk Canucks. You brought him up, Shannon. Kevin Lankinen, just absolutely spectacular last night. We're running out of good things to say about him. Again, there's been some struggles at home, but the team struggled at home, right? So
Yeah.
this record, the 8-0 record on the
Yeah.
road, is just absolutely phenomenal. We've never really seen anything like it. What can you say about Kevin Lankinen and really a late addition to this team?
It's funny because all summer I could not figure out why Lankinen wasn't signed. I had watched him play goal for a couple of different teams, for Chicago and for Nashville. I was always really impressed with his positioning. I always thought he was a really good goaltender. I thought he controlled rebounds well. I couldn't figure out why he wasn't signed. So when Vancouver signed him, I was so happy because I like Shelovs, but the idea of Shelovs and maybe Patera, I was like, that's no thanks. That's two inexperienced goaltenders. Lankinen's got that. I think once Demko comes back, I don't think there's a problem with playing Demko at home and playing Lankinen on the road and trying to balance it out that way. He's fantastic on the road. You did mention, though, too, that Boston was taking low quality shots.
Mm-hmm.
They are fighting it. They don't have the confidence. Even Pasternak right now doesn't have the confidence. Every Bruins game I watch, it's the same. They can get all the shots, but it doesn't feel like they're generating a lot of dangerous opportunities. And you can see they're not in sync with one another right now either.
Yeah.
It's just there's definitely some, I think, and I don't like to speculate. It feels like there might be something in the locker room we don't know about with Boston at this point. And so it is what it is.
And I think the biggest evidence of just the being out of sync is those power plays last night. Woof. Like Boston just doesn't have it on the power play. And I mean, their percentage shows it, but when you watch it last night, like McAvoy's fighting the puck. Like he's one of the best defensemen in the league historically. And now we're seeing him
7 points.
7 points. And again, the empty net goal from Garland, the one that you said you got up and cheered for, like that was McAvoy bobbling a puck and just not making, like, that's a play you would expect from a first-year defenseman. And McAvoy's fighting it. Everybody's fighting it. I will say, like, it seemed like Brad Marchand just has his normal swagger about him right now. And it's just like he's trying to get everybody into the fight. It's a weird dynamic.
Somewhat, but Marchand there's a lot of attitude there, and he just seems angry every game.
Yep.
So I think there's something there. He seems angry every game right now. And when he's angry, if it's not controlled, he actually hurts the team rather than helps it.
Sounds a lot like Brady Tkachuk, who I was throwing a lot of criticism at.
Absolutely. Yes. Tkachuk needs to stay out of the box.
Oh my gosh. And again, that Senators versus Canucks game was just, it was embarrassing, really. The end of it, where he's just skating around the ice looking for someone to go with him. And anyways, we don't need to talk about Brady Tkachuk. Let's continue talking about the Canucks, and let's continue talking about the Pacific Division. We're going to go Canucks, Pacific, and then we'll work our way to anything else that we want to talk about around the rest of the league. But Shannon, when we look at this Canucks team right now, a big topic all season long and even down the tail end of last year was Elias Pettersson. What have you thought about his game so far this season?
I think Pettersson's figuring it out. I mean, and the thing that I don't understand, and I mean, he's not the first star player I've seen it done to, but I've never understood fans kind of rooting against their own player. So like, I'm never gonna, like, I've got a Pettersson locker stall thing there that I picked up like a month ago, because I think Pettersson's one of the most talented players the Canucks have ever had. I think when he said that he turned off social media and he started playing better, I don't think that's a coincidence. I think he's in his own head, and I think he just needs to. And it's funny because I want to say he needs to relax, but I think about Ray Ferraro talking about Bedard and saying when you tell someone to relax, that stresses them out. So you can't just tell someone to relax. But I think he needs to find the fun again. I think he doesn't look like he's enjoying it as much right now. And I think he needs to just have fun, have line mates he's really clicking with, and I think he'll be fine.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think he's starting to find that. Like, he's starting to find that joy again, it seems like. So he's moving in the right direction. We refrain from saying Elias Pettersson is back on this show. We like to take it slow, and we say he's
he
on
had
his
one
way.
good game, and everywhere I saw Pettersson's back, and I'm like, it's one game.
Yeah.
Let's cooler break.
And the other thing, even that one game, like, that's not the ceiling of this player. We've seen him do even better things than he did in that one game. So I absolutely agree with you on Pettersson. Lots of questions in the chat. So we'll get to all those. We'll put those right at the end, Shannon. But on the Canucks, this one is from Jeremy Lee, so we'll read it. He said, "What is Shannon's take on the Canucks blue line and what trades Alvin should make for the deadline? Is there any target in your head that you look at and say that's the perfect fit for the Canucks and they can probably afford him?"
The affording part is where it gets tricky.
Yeah.
Like a pending UFA, I would love to see in a Canucks jersey is Ryan Lindgren. I would, if the Rangers put Lindgren on the market, I would do anything I could to convince the Canucks to go out and get his services, because he's a hard-nosed defenseman. A lot of Rangers are struggling right now, so I wouldn't pay as much attention to that. But I mean, I wouldn't give up a first this year, but maybe a second round pick, maybe a prospect, and maybe somebody on an expiring contract. I'm not as worried about the defense now. I think Brandstrom's played pretty well overall, and his cap hit's fantastic for what he does. So I do think adding a guy like Lindgren, something like that. That's why I wanted Tanev back, but
totally,
it didn't happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, there's so many targets out there, and you just made the point of the acquisition cost is where it gets a little tricky, because, like, in my mind, there's no better fit than Rasmus Anderson, but the cost the cost of getting him, and then I know he signed through next year, which is great. That's helpful, but again, what it's going to cost to get him on the trade market from Calgary with that additional year as well. This isn't just a rental. That is going to make it very, very challenging.
That's at least, I would say, at least 2 firsts for Anderson with the way he's played this year. I can't see the Flames giving him up without asking for a king's ransom, because he's been very good for them.
And that's the thing, is why wouldn't they? Because there's going to be a lot of teams around the league that are looking for around line, and Rasmus Anderson's among the best, right? So it's going to be an interesting kind of deadline. But when you look at this team, and this is the question I posed to Cam Robinson yesterday, we had him on the show. When you look at this Canucks team, Shannon, like, is it just go get a top 4 defenseman and you're all of a sudden in contending status?
Yeah. During the offseason, that was something that I was hoping that they'd find a way to do. And I understand that the price of adding a defenseman is kind of astronomical. That, and adding a center, the price of adding a center is really expensive. But that really is it. As long as Demko comes back, and if he's able to stay healthy, and if they can avoid any kind of major injury issues, which Vancouver historically has had that at times. But yeah, I think they're one defenseman away. The Pacific is wide open. There is no Pacific Division team that I look at right now and think, well, they're really scary. So the Pacific is wide open, and if the Canucks add the right defenseman, they could be favorites to win it.
Who do you think right now, like, who's your pick to come out of the Pacific? Because, like, I look at it and I say Vegas is probably the most legit team that's at the top right now. Like, they're first in the Pacific. You never count the Oilers out, and like you just said, like, the Canucks are second in points percentage in the Pacific. So it's right there for everybody, really. But who comes out of the Pacific for you?
See, Vegas, I don't know if Samsonov is the guy for the playoffs. Aiden Hill has been a little better lately. So Vegas's goaltending and Edmonton's goaltending, there's obviously been issues there. So again, if Vancouver has Demko, I think that gives Vancouver something that both Vegas and Edmonton don't have, which is complete certainty in net and no doubts about who the starter is and, how all that's going to pan out. And so I don't see any reason why it can't be the Canucks. The funny thing is, Calgary with Dustin Wolf, if they can stay in the hunt, who knows? But I do think Vancouver, again, it's all going to rest on getting Demko back, getting a blue liner probably at the deadline. Yeah, they can come out of the division.
Dustin Wolf, you mentioned him. probably the favorite for the Calder Trophy right now. And I have the privilege of voting on those awards. And when I did my predictions at the start of the year of who's going to be where, like I thought, oh, this is Matvei Michkov's trophy to lose. Looks like he might be losing it because Dustin Wolf is just playing extremely well right now. And he's the reason that the Flames are even competitive in my mind.
Yeah, Wolf has been fantastic. However, in the last game I watched of San Jose's, Macklin Celebrini's really figuring it out. The Sharks are kind of fun to watch right now because there's no pressure, and Celebrini's just got a little bit of everything. People are starting to figure out too with the analytics that he's got a little bit of grit. He wins some puck battles there. If he can stay healthy the rest of the year, it could very well be his award.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's smart that you brought up Celebrini because a guy we talk about a lot on this show is Connor Bedard, Macklin Celebrini, and I feel like a big distinction between those two guys' situation, other than the fact that San Jose is technically a little bit further along in their rebuild than Chicago is just that like San Jose went out and got Tyler Toffoli, and I think that's a super smart pickup for a team like that to make, and I don't think Chicago has done enough to provide a good enough environment for Connor Bedard, if that makes sense.
Chicago went out and they got wingers who would have been perfect for Bedard 5 years ago. Like Taylor Hall would have been great back in 2018. Taylor Hall's not that player anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, Nick Foligno's a great leader. He's not a top line player. Dickinson is a good third line center, and they're playing him with Bedard, which he's got some chemistry with Dickinson, but that's not an ideal situation. And so it's going to weigh down Bedard's numbers because if you're playing against Chicago, you're just going to key on 98. That's what you're going to do. It's going to frustrate him. And then people are going to be going, Bedard can't score. What's going on? So it snowballs from there. And it is, like you said, adding to Foley, huge difference maker for San Jose. Granlund's having a career year too. Zetterlund's been playing really well. It is a very different situation Celebrini finds himself in than Bedard.
Looking a little bit more at the Pacific here, and I mean, I didn't plan on bringing this team up today, but we like to talk about every team, and we brought up San Jose. Kind of the contrast to that, the Anaheim Ducks. Like it finally feels for the first time that San Jose has got a little bit of direction. Anaheim's in this never-ending rebuild. Like, what do you make of the Ducks this season? I think they were hoping for a step from some players that they haven't gotten so far, and maybe some regression from Cam Fowler. Like, what do you make of the Ducks this season?
The Ducks, they have a lot of young players. It feels like they might need a veteran who can settle things down and lead these guys. I'm not sure if and Gudas is a good captain. I'm not slagging on Gudas or anything, but they definitely, I think they need a veteran forward. They need somebody who can help with these guys. And they just don't have it. The good news is Dostal and Gibson, when they've played, they've both been fantastic. They're keeping Anaheim in the hunt by themselves. Leo Carlsson has the ability, I think, to take over the game, but I don't know if he's got the right line mates. That's the tricky part, is that chemistry. You can put it together on paper, and then on the ice, it may turn out completely different.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what we've seen with the Ducks this season. Let's bring it back to the Canucks a little bit here, Shannon. Nils Höglander. Right now, it's not very good for Nils Höglander. We didn't see him in the third period against Boston. I brought it up off the top of the show. Like, they just signed this guy to an extension, a 3-year deal.
Right.
How does this situation in your mind end for Nils Höglander? Because the more I see this, the more I just think, okay, like it's going to be a trade.
See, and a couple of years ago, I thought for Höglander to really reach his potential, it probably would be in Vancouver. It felt like he wasn't in their plans. And then last season, he forced his way in with how he was playing, and he was putting the puck in the net. I would not be entirely surprised if he was part of what they decide to include in a package for a defenseman.
Yep.
If they decide, okay, Höglander's a good young defenseman, or a good young forward, he's signed past this year, it might make him an attractive option to a team like maybe the Rangers. I'd rather not see Höglander get traded because he's really won me over. He's such a hard worker. Höglander and Garland are like two of my favorites. They never take a shift off. And I would not be surprised to see them end up moving him, but whoever gets him is getting a pretty darn good player.
It's so interesting because when the season started, like we saw him with Connor Garland and Elias
Mhm.
Pettersson, and Elias Pettersson was I don't want to say the weakest link, but it was Höglander and it was Garland that was driving that line at the start of
Yes.
the season. And that's just gone from Höglander's game right now. It's the neutral zone play, it's the defensive zone play. We know that, we can see it, and Talkett's pretty open about that too. So I am very curious how this ends with Nils Höglander. Let's get to a question from the chat here, Shannon.
Sure.
This one from Ty's Hockey Talk. He said, with the
Okay.
exception of back-to-backs, would it be a possibility for Lankinen to play all/most away games and Demko to play all/most home games? It would play into their strengths and manage Demko's minutes. You brought up this idea right at the top, basically, of keep
Yeah.
Lankinen on the road, keep Demko at home. I've never even thought of that as a concept, but you like that idea.
It's something that, and I hate to bring up 2011, but if the Canucks had played Schneider in Boston and Luongo at home, who knows how things might have been different. You've got to, and in this day and age, you've got to have two goaltenders going. So I think that makes the most sense. Clearly, Lankinen has struggles at home. It's been crazy. Like the whole team has, but I think Demko at home makes a lot of sense, and Lankinen getting maybe 60% of the starts on the road.
Sure.
And then that way too, what that also does is it means Demko shouldn't be getting overworked, because there's the possibility that with this unique injury he has, he's probably going to have to baby it a little bit for a while. Even when he comes back, it's probably still going to be a factor. So Lankinen being able to play those road games could really help him out.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great take. And again, this is a guy that was signed so late into free agency. We heard Rick Tocchet after the game last night basically come out and say, like, Lankinen's still the starter when Demko comes back. I think the term he used was, I would be nuts to sit him on the bench with the way he's playing right now. And let's talk about that as we kind of close out here. The road record for the Canucks is significantly better than the home record. I obviously, this isn't just on Tocchet. It's not. But when you have last change and you have that advantage, and Tocchet's coming out and saying things like, again, the day that the Islanders were in town, he comes out and says, Patrick outcoached me tonight, when he's talking about Patrick Waugh. Like, what do you make of the Canucks' struggles at home compared to what they've been able to do when they lose that advantage of last change? And I know that's not all the story, but what do you make of that record?
See, when a team's really good on the road and they're not good at home, a lot of the time is they're not making the simple plays. They're under pressure, and maybe they're trying to force passes that on the road they drag the puck back and they look for but they're trying to make that tic-tac-toe play, and they're maybe squeezing their sticks a little bit harder. And really, the Canucks need to take the road game home. I'm trying to remember which team it was that was struggling at home and they were really good on the road, and so their coach started making them stay at a hotel when they were at home to try to simulate that they were on the road, to try to shake them out of their home issues. I don't think it's Tocchet. He's a player's coach, though, so he holds them accountable, which I think they respect him for, and he will put himself on the sword rather than, I mean, he's not shy about calling out players, but he will fall on that sword himself to basically say, look, I'm accountable too, which I think is great in a coach. And I'm kind of glad that he sits guys no matter how much their money is worth. I do hope they figure this out at home, because their road game is pretty darn near perfect. I know the shots were lopsided for Boston. It didn't reflect that game at all last night. It just didn't. The Canucks defense was fantastic. They just need to figure out how to keep it simple at home, is what I think it is.
Yeah, they've locked it down so well on the road, in Ottawa, again in Boston as well. Okay, final thing from me, Shannon. Your biggest surprise around the league, looking at the NHL as a whole, biggest surprise, is it still the Nashville Predators?
I mean, Nashville's still a surprise. The one thing is, Stamkos at this point in time, you know that when guys get into their mid-30s, they can have that slowdown. Marchessault is in that age range as well, so if you get older in this league, it can kind of slow you down. I've been really surprised. Like, I didn't expect Pittsburgh to be a playoff team. I didn't expect them to be this bad.
Yeah.
I did not expect them to be this much of a disaster. And in terms of a positive surprise, I would name the Flames as the positive surprise. They've exceeded everybody's expectations, and I don't know how much longer they can do it, but they've exceeded everybody's expectations.
Yeah, I mean, we've been wondering that since October. It's like, how much longer can they do that? And December 1st is coming up and they're still doing it. Shannon, thanks so much for doing this. We're definitely going to get you back on the show. We really appreciate it. People can find you on YouTube at The Hockey Guy. Anything else that you would like to plug before we let you go?
No, I got 15 games tonight, so thoughts and prayers are appreciated as I try to keep up with everything tonight. Tomorrow is the day off, but yeah, I'd be happy to come back anytime you'll have me.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us. Much appreciated. And we will close it out there.